All right, what's up, everyone? Kevin Allen here from DFS Army. And this is the NFL Week 15 content and cash lineup review show. Now, once again, if you haven't seen this before, what we do every week in DFS Army is we take a look back on we're looking back on the NFL Week 15 slate. We're taking a look at some of the tools, some of the content, and I'm going to review my cash game lineup, show you how I came up with it, compare it to some of the content that we put out there, and hopefully we'll find out if it was a winner, a loser, or what the hell happened this week. It was an exciting week and one that got a little bit crazy on Sunday, as often happens. The big news on Sunday was that Zeke Elliott was ruled out for the Cowboys, and that was not expected to happen. So we had this 90 minutes before lock, very important information, and that was something that everybody had to react to. Sometimes we note that we were coming off a week where just the prior week we had a very similar situation with Leonard Fournette being ruled out and Ronald Jones Jr. being sort of declared the ultimate starter. And so we had a similar situation, and there was a little bit of cognitive bias effect with that as well in terms of pivoting. So let's go through all of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I ended up using for my primary cash lineup. I actually did a couple of things this week to be unique. One of which is I left my original lineup out there so I could show, I put it in some contests so that I have it for this review to see how that would have done, the one prior to the Pollard news. I also wound up making a second lineup that was really designed for small tournaments, like a 3-max, but I liked it so much I threw it in a lot of cash games as well. And so I'll show you that one as well, and kind of we'll figure out the results. But the first thing I want to do is take a look back at some of the content and kind of what we wrote up on Sunday morning. I'm also going to show you the Domination Station Optimizer, the chalkboard, and all of our tools, and how I use them to come up with these lineups, which I think is as important as anything else. So right off the bat, if you look right here on screen, you will see what I wound up going with as my cash lineup this week. Jalen Hurts at quarterback obviously was a smash play, and that was a pay down option, which was very important in a week where we had some expensive running backs to try to squeeze into our lineups. Alvin Kamara and Henry were lock button plays, basically free squares and cash for the most part. Kamara 80% owned, didn't matter what he did. Emmanuel Sanders opened up as essentially a cash game free square as well once Michael Thomas was ruled out and Drew Brees was declared the starter. He's got to throw to somebody, right? So he was basically free square territory. And then we had some decisions to make beyond that. Do we pay up at tight end? Do we pay down? A couple of different approaches. If we pay down, who do we go with on the cheapies to squeeze in Travis Kelce at tight end? That was always a big question. Should we pay all the way down on defense this week? And of course, the third running back. So I'm going to start with my content and a little bit of the notes I wrote up on Sunday morning for DFS Army subscribers in our DFS Army Slack chat. And this right here is my Sunday notes. And I think these are really, really important to take a look at each week. I put them in DFS Army Slack, usually around 10:30 or 11 o'clock. And I really like to focus on cash and like tight builds, as we like to say, 3-max type contests, because if I'm sitting here giving you crazy tournament plays, most of the time they're going to be wrong. That's why they're crazy tournament plays. And that's just not my focus for DFS Army content. So as you can see here, we talked a little bit about some injury situations, Drake and Chase Edmonds. And I did mention the RB Ahmed for Miami, who did end up smashing, by the way. So I was pretty excited about that mention. Hopefully got some of you guys on to Sullivan Ahmed for Miami. He wound up going for over 100 yards and a touchdown. Here's an important paragraph here. At quarterback this week in cash games, there are plenty of good options. Mahomes is the top play from a raw points perspective, but he's cost prohibitive. Lamar and Murray, even Watson, are all perfectly viable plays. And I just point out Lamar and Murray both smashed. Watson are perfectly viable plays, but I'm looking to pay down at the position. Jalen Hurts does enough with his rushing game to provide a nice cash floor with plenty of potential upside. His salary coming in $2K below Mahomes opens up a spend up at RB. So essentially this week we're deciding between a pay up quarterback combined with a punt at running back, or paying down and using a better flex. The entire field will have to make this decision. I'm going to the pay down QB route. So essentially, we're rolling with Jalen Hurts. I did not expect him to do what he did, of course, 40 points. But we saw the previous week that Hurts is going to run the football, designed runs 15 times a game or more. And that's enough for any quarterback at 5,900 to smash value. It doesn't matter what they do beyond that, because if you're going to give me 70, 80 yards, he's going to get some passing. There will be a touchdown or two scored most likely. So one way or another, that quarterback is going to do well, and especially on a team like the Eagles that doesn't necessarily lean on the running back. Now, the running back position, very important. The most important a lot of times in your cash games. And this week was very obvious. We had Kamara lock button. Then Derrick Henry was pretty much also in a lock button situation. Too good of a matchup to pass up and enough value to make it work. So finally, the final decision was, and when I was writing this up, it was Henry and Akers round out the top three with Fournette closely behind. And again, this was before the Pollard news. Now, my original approach was going to be to fade Fournette, who I thought might be bad chalk, in favor of Cam Akers. Now, this is a big part of DFS and big part of week 15, right? I love Cam Akers. He was in a great spot, 17-point favorite, Rams home. I mean, couldn't ask for more from a running back spot. He had 29 or 30 touches the previous week. It was a smash spot on paper. Now, of course, no one expected the Jets to win that game. No one expected the Rams to come out flat and just looking like shit. But that does happen in NFL football. Now, normally it doesn't matter in cash games because a chalk play like that. Let's take a look at our NFL chalkboard to sort of point it out. When we look at the chalkboard, which is a big part of what I use to come up with my cash games, not the only part. I'll show you another component of my cash lineup here in a second and how I come up with it. But when you look at the chalkboard, there is safety in ownership in cash games. So I'm going to point out, what if the Pollard news never happened? And it was just a decision between Fournette and Akers. I was willing to roll the dice this week, and it would have been a bad dice roll, but I was willing to roll the dice that Akers would outscore Fournette significantly. Now, that looked like it was going to happen, and of course, Tampa wound up with a miraculous kind of like second half craziness, and Fournette got some really some touchdown variance that led to what wound up being a pretty good score for him. But overall, I was comfortable with going into the slate knowing that. Now, had that chalk not opened up, it's very possible that, we would have had Akers owned at 40% in tournaments, maybe Fournette owned like 50%. I don't think it would have been the killer blow. The rest of the lineup would have been very, very important in that scenario. When the Pollard news opened up, that pretty much destroyed the approach of paying up in three running backs, because now there was an extra, probably a better value play even than Fournette sitting there staring us at the face for another 1,500 in savings. And it actually changed the lineup construction techniques. And I'm going to show you two lineups I made with Pollard, two versions of it, both of which smashed, by the way, but two versions of a lineup that I made with Pollard here. And it's a pretty cool thing to see. Just to see how you could have gone two different ways. And that was sort of confusing me a little bit. Again, last minute, so I just ran with both. But there's safety in numbers. In looking at the rest of the wide receiver chalkboard, you could see Emmanuel Sanders, Brandon Ayuk, right at the top of the list. And this is important because these two guys were prime cash plays. Take a look at my cash lineup here again. Who's in there? I'll show you lineup number 2, and that's where. So lineup number 1 and lineup number 2 and lineup number 3. I'll show you all three, but Ayuk was a great cash play. Emmanuel Sanders was the cash chalk. And they're right there on the chalkboard. It's right here showing on the chalkboard. Ayuk, Sanders, top two guys, both scored really, really well. Now we had some other players pop up late as value, so we'll go over all of that. At tight end, we had a big decision to make in cash games as well. Yeah, a lot of people stayed with Akers, and again, obviously it didn't work. I didn't think Akers over Fournette was a bad play. I thought that was the right play this week, and I still think those lineups could have cashed. Akers, of course, had a massively disappointing game, but I thought that was actually the better approach. And Fournette was busting until the Bucks team turned it around. But nonetheless, I did think that was the right approach. Defense, Seattle was the top chalk play, and they pretty much worked. There was no reason to do anything else there. So, Seattle was the strong play, and they're who I went with for the most part. But let me show you a couple interesting things. So I'm going to show you the domination station optimizer because it's not just important to rely when we're making a cash lineup, value is everything. So one of the things I do is I go to the domination station, right? And I look at each position group and I sort by value. When I'm trying to come up with my cash line, I'm like, who are the values? Okay, so I'm going to sort by value. And here we had on the Dom station, and now I already told you, I never play Jets wide receivers. Yeah, and you're right. The Jets' run defense has been the foil to many running backs this year. They have. Absolutely. They're still playing hard. But check this out. Manuel Sanders, Traquan Smith, Michael Gallup are the top 3 value plays. I'm pointing this out because look who's in my lineup. That trio. There's no miracles happening here. These are being pointed out by the numbers. We have an excellent projection system. Keg is the best at putting these together. So I like to trust the projections at times. Now, not when it's a fucking Jets wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. But everything else, yes. Let's take a look at the running back value chart. Guys, this stuff is not as complicated as you want to make it seem. Kamara, Pollard, Fournette, top 3 names. What? Pollard and Fournette. So, like, if you just left it to its thing, it pretty much tries to squeeze it in. Now, there is value. Again, I'm sorting by fantasy points per dollar. Now, why you say didn't I use this trio? Why did I use Derrick Henry? Because the more expensive a player is, the less this number could be, but them still be an excellent play. So I don't need 3.25x from a $9,500 player. Tight end against the Jets has been money. You're right, Michael Wynn. Absolutely. And Higbee went nuts. I actually thought about playing him for that reason. Somebody mentioned that. But I thought it was going to be such a blot. But nonetheless, if you take a look at Kamara and Pollard were the top 2 value. This wasn't that difficult to discern. Fournette right behind them. Felt like bad chalk. Sometimes it's bad chalk. But here, Akers already was starting to come down the list. He was not one of the highest value plays, and we projected him much stronger than sort of the market projection was, which was definitely a little bit lower on him. We also projected Tony Pollard. Again, we have these baseline projections right here, which are sort of like generic projections we get from a provider. And we show those because I like to know like kind of what like the generic projection is compared to our DFS Army projection. Now, Derrick Henry, the reason we're playing him was raw points. Give me my 25 points and Dalvin Cook right behind. Take the raw points in cash. So, again, a lot of these things were borne out. Now I'm going to show you what my lineup was. Did I forget to go to anything? No. Showed the chalkboard. Yeah, I showed the chalkboard. I showed everything. So now I'm going to show you my lineup, and I'm going to show you something real quick. Here's the lineup that I used. This was my primary. I have a second one as well. But in my primary lineup, what happened here was I originally had Akers in here. When I went down to Pollard, some salary opened up. I also had Brandon Ayuk in the lineup, and I'll show you that version of the lineup in a second. So I went down to Pollard, and now I have this 2,200 in savings. All this salary and savings, I had like 1,400 going from Akers to Pollard. Okay. So I started looking around, and I'm like, the only thing I could really do with this original lineup, and I'm going to actually show you what that looks like. I'm going to say, all right, check this out. This is a different version of the lineup. So in this one, again, I take out Akers. I put in Pollard. I have 1,500 in savings. In this spot right here, I had Brandon Ayuk. So I just applied that to Ayuk. I was able to get up to DeAndre Hopkins. Boom. My original lineup just went to DeAndre Hopkins. Okay, he ends up outscoring Ayuk by 12 fantasy points. Great. Of course, going down from Akers to Pollard, ends up being a smash as well. I'm going to show you the original lineup. I have it here. So this is the original version that I had before the Pollard news, right? In this case, I had Christian Kirk in it. There was one other little squeeze change I did where I believe I went down to the wide receiver from Miami in this one right here, right? Bowden Jr. Yes, because all of the other wide receivers from Miami were out. So Bowden Jr., he was on my list. He was a chalky cash play as well. So I go down from Kirk to Bowden Jr. I go up from Ayuk to DeAndre Hopkins, and I go down from Akers to Tony Pollard. That changed the lineup from 140 to this one of 187. This I really ran in 3 max, but I put it in some cash games as well because I loved it for cash after I made it. And I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to put some extra lineups in cash. But the official lineup I used, again, went back to this one right here. So in this case, I had this salary left over, right? And I'm like, where am I going to apply it? I didn't want to really. I thought Ayuk was a good play. The play that I thought that was the worst on my team was actually, and there was another version I could have done, but the play I thought that was the worst on my team was actually Cole Kmet, a crappy tight end. So I was like, wow, you know what? I can get up to Travis Kelce with a little adjustment down off of Ayuk here, going down to like a Michael Gallup. So in the case of this lineup, I went with a pay up at tight end, which worked out just fine. 177, smashed all the cash games. Yes. That was the Bowden Jr. call. We got the late news, and I was like, all right, let me get Bowden Jr. in there. That's what that other lineup was about. But I want to show you something else really interesting, because a lot of people, again, cash games are so important. They're not that hard. Let me show you something real quick. If you just, once the news came out and we had Tony Pollard reprojected, this is the domination station as of right now, unadjusted. I reset settings. This is just what it was. If you just hit optimize, and even unadjusted, you got a lineup with Lamar at the helm, but Pollard, Henry, Smith, Sanders, Ayuk, Jared Cook, Kamara, and Seahawks. Now, what does this lineup do? It cashes. This hit the cash line. But as you know, I was always going to play Jalen Hurts this week. I told you very clearly. I'm paying down at quarterback and play Jalen Hurts. So what I did was I smashed the adore button. And you're going to see how I came up with my lineup. It's not that hard. I smashed the adore button on Jalen Hurts, and I got a Jalen Hurts lineup, and look at it. Okay, Smith, Gallup, Sanders, Kelce, Kamara. All right, let me just show you. I mean, that's the fucking lineup. Smash cash everywhere. The Lamar Jackson version also smash cash. But this lineup is literally just hitting the love button on Jalen Hurts to make sure he shows up. And there you go. Got Gallup in there, got Sanders, got Traquan. As you can see, those were the 3 highest value plays. You know what? I am a little surprised that Bowden Jr. didn't pop. Where is he? And that could just be a result of, I don't know, the matchup. I don't know why Bowden Jr. didn't pop on the projections, but he didn't. But nonetheless, I handcrafted that other one. I put him in there. I don't think it was all that intense. If you look at my cheat sheet this week, I actually wrote up Bowden Jr. and said exactly that. If those other guys are out, Bowden Jr. should be a nice little floor play at 3,600. So there you have it. I think the big psychological thing that I wanted to go over this week was there was this fear of going from one's original lineup, which had Akers in it, which we all liked. And by the way, Akers was 30% on cash. Not a bad play. Was a good play. But going down, there was a fear of going down from Akers because last week a lot of people changed their lineup to Ron Jones Jr., And they have this recency bias of that not working. Like you had Montgomery in there, you should put in Ron Jones Jr. or some shit like that. I don't think Ron Jones Jr. killed you last week. He put up a 13 at 6K. All right. But the point was that was still a good play. I don't think the Ronald Jones Jr. play was bad. It just didn't work. Okay. I don't think Ayuk was a bad play this week. He was 30% on. It was a good play. He was in a smash spot. It could have worked really well. And by the way, it did hit in single entry GPPs. The one I used, like I said, the one I wound up using in GPPs though was this one. So this is the single entry GPP lineup. But yeah, a lot of you guys, you gotta wipe out that recency bias and let's focus on playing good plays. So now why take the recency bias out? Why did Pollard work? Forget the touchdown at the end that smashed him up from like 20 points to 30. That had nothing to do with it. We didn't need that. The reason it worked was because the salary, the cheaper guy, right? We were already all playing Henry and Kamara. That was already locked into cash. Everybody's playing Henry and Kamara. Some people didn't play Henry. They played Dalvin Cook. They were wrong. Henry was the right play in cash. You take the raw points in that kind of a matchup. That was the correct play. By the way, Henry, if it wasn't for the fact that Tannehill like vultured a couple touchdowns, Henry should have put up 40 points here. That was the right play. So the question is, why were we afraid, or some people afraid, to come off? Well, I already made this. I don't want to adjust. Every time I tinker, I lose money. Don't think like that. The Pollard news changed the entire complexion of the slate. And I'm going to actually, you know what? I'm going to show you what we wrote about it because I wrote a note here. In news and notes, right after the big news. This is 11:37 yesterday morning. I write in DFS Army Slack. And for those of you who are watching this, who are just not DFS Army subscribers, this is what you miss out on. We do this for every sport. For NBA, you should say, I would say for NBA, the late breaking news is the single most important channel that we have, that I watch across all of DF. There's no piece of content better than our late breaking news channel for NBA. Nothing. Because we the news analysis, it's all right there. It's really the best thing that we do. But if you take a look at here, I said, okay, we have big news. Zeke is out, which thrusts Pollard into extreme value territory. Pollard still has a tough matchup versus the 49ers, but the volume potential is massive. I prefer him over Fournette now, and he is a solid cash game play. I don't know what more I could say. I don't know what more you could say than that. We want the value at running back. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And by the way, as like the minutes pass, because we're also human, and a new piece of news comes out, and it's like you're trying to absorb it, share the info with everybody. But as you absorb and think about it for a second, you're like, all right, well, Fournette, and again, you're thinking, all right, Fournette, his team doesn't really like him. Healthy scratch last week. There's two other running backs on the roster. Sure, it's a pretty decent matchup, but actually Atlanta's pretty good against running backs, probably better than even San Francisco has been. So then we looked at that. So I'm like, now you had two pay down options. At that point, you basically could not pay up your third square, because now it became a question not of Fournette or Akers, where I was willing to make the Akers risk. And this is the most important part of this whole breakdown. It was no longer a question between, right, when making the original lineup, we had like, oh, do we want to pay down for Fournette or can we pay for Akers? Figure out a way to get a much better play in there. Now, does Akers end up not smashing? All right, that happened. But that was a random occurrence of a 17-point favorite losing, right? But we had this question, Fournette or Akers, and I was willing to take a shot that Fournette was bad chalk. But then it became between Fournette and Pollard, and I definitely like Pollard above Fournette. So the comparison in cash changed from Fournette Akers to Fournette Pollard. So in order to differentiate from Fournette, I had to go Akers before. Now I could just go to Pollard, save the money. And that's why Pollard became the best play. That's why it was safe to come down off of Akers. Because we're comparing pieces. Everybody got Henry in there. Everybody got Fournette. Some people are paying up at quarterback. Other people paying down to Hurts. I already knew Hurts was the play. Don't need to even think about it. Although I did consider again, with that little bit of savings going from Hurts to Kyler Murray, because I thought Kyler Murray is a great play as well, and he did end up smashing also, but Hurts did his thing. So the question became not Akers Fournette, but it was Fournette Pollard, and I preferred Pollard over Fournette, and I thought that Pollard was a good enough way to differentiate. That's the important factor here. That's what changed. And then in tournaments, again, it became kind of 3-max became the same situation. Some people are going to play this. Actually, the play was Fournette and Pollard. I mean, if you did that, you did really well. Yeah, I mean, this is it. Pollard was not just getting the running back snaps. He was getting all this. They didn't have any other running backs on the team. You played a Brady stack. If you did that in cash, yes, of course, that was too cute. Brady was playable, but you don't stack Brady in cash because his pass catchers are not stable. We don't know who he's going to throw to. So no, you should not have played Brady. Like I said, to me, the only question in cash this week was, am I going to play Hurts? And it wasn't a question. I said very comfortably. Originally, I was going to play Taysom Hill. No, in tournaments, it's not too cute, man. Nothing is too cute in tournaments. That's a perfectly fine stack. Brady did fine. You play whoever you want in GPP. Jordan Cooper, Blenderhead, made this play whoever you want. That he's the king of that. And he's right. Play whoever you want. It's tournament. Did I expect last week that Baker Mayfield was going to score 40 fantasy points against Baltimore? No. Play whoever you want in GPP. As long as the lineup is correlated, it doesn't matter. Correlate the lineup, play whoever you want. Guess right. That's what a GPP is. Guess right. Yeah, you know what? The cash market, though, and good question, Chad. And I'm going to tell you something. The cash, they were not low on Pollard, though. But they were too low on him. So let's take a look at this big tournament for an example. So you're right. He's 36% owned. And I bet if I look around, and I'm going to look around for a Fournette lineup, Fournette was potentially higher owned than that. Let's see if I could find a Fournette. Yeah. No. So Fournette went 25. And Pollard went 33. And that's right. Well, you're talking about, I'm assuming the Brady stack, and that's why you can't ever play him in cash. Geek was on the money as usual. Thank you, Scott. You fucking crushed this week. By the way, Scott is putting out a DFS Army free roll for to celebrate another of his big wins. So if you're in DFS Army's chat, make sure to check out this post about Scott's free roll. Thank you, Scott. You're freaking awesome. Been smashing. And, for those of you guys who haven't noticed it yet, this is in the News and Notes channel, a free roll for DFS Army subscribers. And now I'm reading that there's one for the staff. So thanks for the money, Scott. Taking that goes to me. What? You think I can't play in a fucking staff contest and take all the monies? Fuck everyone else. I want it. That's how I roll. Appreciate that. You're awesome, dude. So back to it. Original lineup, 140. Adjusted lineup here. Wait, that's not mine. Adjusted lineup here, 177. Smashes everything. This was a pretty good week for me. I came off. So I think this is the fourth of the lineup review shows, maybe the fifth. I can't remember. I think it's the fourth. Last week was the Ron Jones and the last week was a bad one for me, but a lot of people actually worked out really well last week, DFS Army members. So that was cool. I just kind of had an unforced error of going to Zeke over Montgomery. I never do it again. I went on a rant about Zeke last week. So it felt very good for me to get back to the winning ways, get back to winning in cash. And now that we've said that, guys, I want to show you one other thing that I was doing all week this week, and that this is a tournament-focused concept that I want you guys to start doing. Okay, so stay with me here. Don't leave. Stay with me. Crush cash. We're going to crush cash again next week. We're coming to the end of the football season. So, let's finish strong. We got another really 1 or 2 weeks left. You're going to get back to it. But I want to show you something. For those of you guys who are hungry about winning, guys, the back test tool that we have is so important. So here's what I've been doing in my spare time. This is what I do in my spare time. I've been going back across the entire season of NFL, week after week, slate after slate. Now, this is the DFS Army Domination Station Optimizer. And when I go to back test mode and I put on Draftkings, right? I can, or FanDuel, whichever one you want. This is the most important thing you can do. Please do this, guys. I want to see more of you winning tournaments. This is how you win tournaments. I don't even know that this exists elsewhere, this sort of a tool. So what this allows you to do is go back and rerun, re-optimize every week of the season, whichever one you want. So here, just pick a week. Pick a week, right? Here's the main slate from November 8th. Okay? You pick a week and go right back to it, and you can rerun your optimization however you want. So you can go in and, again, take a look at the slate as a whole, rerun everything. Maybe you just want to go in and just do a very simple rule like, hey, let's see if something very simple like stack QB with 2 players of pass catcher, same team, just one simple rule. Now this will take forever to run without any with so few constraints on it. But let's say I ran 150 lineups. Let me take out all the garbage here, right? And you just run 150 lineups. Hopefully this will run fast. I want to see if I could show you guys a demo of this. Let's see how quickly it runs. Yeah, that's running pretty quick. All right, so I'm going to give you the reason why I'm doing this. What I want you guys to do, and this is your homework assignment, pick a week, pick 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Over the course of the season, I want you to go back and just start messing with it. All right? Now, how are you going to mess with this? A lot of guys are doing the mini max each week. I saw a lot of mini max wins and stuff like that, even this week, especially short contests. But what I want you to do is go back and rerun the tool and start messing with the settings a little bit. How many uniques did you run? What kind of stack did you run? Try it with 3 uniques, 4 uniques, and I'm going to show you why in a second. I was actually talking to some mathematicians recently about how they kind of go over their proofs of things and whatnot. And I know, yeah, other people talk to normal people, doctor. I talk to mathematicians. And what they do is they'll run the same set of variables, and they'll just run it over and over again and kind of mark down what's working and what's not. And they'll figure out, all right, these are the best settings that you can use on this tool. So here, I just ran 150 lineups, and I'm going to show you what I do. Right? I just ran 150 using the backtest tool. Quarterback with no less than 2 wide receiver tight end from the same team. And now I'm just going to kind of look at what resulted from it. All right, so I got way too much of just a couple of different guys. Let's see, a lot of, this was that week where David Johnson was chalk, right? So I'm just looking through, and let's see what came up. 100% of this one guy, that's never good. But just messing with some settings, right? And then I look here and I go, all right, and now how did these lineups work? What ended up happening? And so here we can sort these by Final Fantasy points to see what the end result will be, right? And we could start to learn about settings that might work and might not. Now, in a real world situation, would you ever run 95% Tyler Lockett of all things? No, of course not. But this gives us a little bit of an idea. So now you start to say, all right, well, what could I have done with the settings to make this a little bit less, a little bit less chalky? One of the things that, should I have run more uniques? Should I set more limits? Should I look through? Of course, you would do this. You're not going to run this amount of any one player, but it looks like this was a week where Russell Wilson was supremely chalky. I wonder what game that was. Let's take a look here and see if we can even see. But it was 55-point total. So that was the exciting game of the week. I don't know how it ended up. Let's see what ended up happening with Russ. 29 points. He did well. It's probably a DK Metcalf week or something. I don't know. Let's see if we got any Metcalf in here. Not much, all things considered. Who did we get a lot of? David Moore. David Moore ended up smashing. Tyler Lockett did not. So there's a Justin Herbert lineup. But the reason I'm doing this, guys, this isn't a time. I don't actually want to run through all of this right now, but you want to go back, re-optimize, and say, all right, what would have gotten me? What could I have done to get to the nuts lineup? You should be doing this. Say, all right, what type of settings can I use? What kind of limitations do I want to? If I look at ownership and I say, all right, I'm going to set every ownership of anybody who's popping at no more than double their projection or 1.5x their projection. So I might go, all right, let's set a limit on Tyler Lockett of 30. Let's set a limit on Russell Gage. He's 6. So let's set a limit of 13 or 12. Here, Julio Jones 20%, but the projections love him. All right, how about 30% max? That kind of thing. He's 20%. We'll go 30% max on this guy. This is without using a whole lot of personal sort of bias involved. And also, maybe I should up the number of uniques. I ran 3. That didn't produce, if you look here, it didn't produce a great result, a final fantasy point of 160. That's terrible. That's not winning any fucking tournaments. So let's try a more diverse approach. Let me increase the number of uniques I'm using to 5. Maybe I need to adjust the randomization. So what I want you to do to train yourself on how to use an optimizer and how to mass multi-enter is practice this. You could practice on cash game. It's really hard to remember what the cash game you really need to do right after the slate ends, right? Let's go back. Let's see. That's why we do the cash game review, guys, because right after the slate ends, I want to look at the content that was in front of me, look at the chalkboard, look at the values, and then look at cash tournaments and see, all right, what worked and what didn't. But this is a tool you can use year round. There's no time, and this is what you should do in your free time. Like the Queen's Gambit girl, she's running through old matches in her head, right, all day. They're replaying old matches, and that's replaying slates is the same concept. Relook at the slate, replay it. Then when you see a similar one pop up, you'll know what to do. So it's going to run slower. But here we go. So I'm running another run here with 5 uniques and some limits set on some players. Here we go. Now, okay, the highest lineup, 180. All right, so we're going up. Yeah, Corey Davis was great this week. You're right. Corey Davis was great. He smashed. And by the way, he was projected well. I'm surprised fewer people weren't on him. Once again, recency bias. But look what happened here. I increased number of uniques, set some limits, and we're getting a more diverse. Now, I remember David Johnson and hating him, for example. Now, I don't remember. I always hate Houston running backs. This was against the Jaguars, which was actually a good matchup, but I never play like a Houston running back. So let's see what he ended up. Well, he probably did shit, but I would look at a David Johnson and say, I don't like him that much. So I'm going to start to set some more limits. I never played Josh Jacobs. So, all right, let's limit him. I don't know what happened. That was a week, I think, where Chase Edmonds was chalk and ended up exploding. That I don't think I would have been off of. But you get the idea. We start to make these adjustments and then say, all right, well, what could I have done different? Should I have tried? Maybe we should try this with a comeback. So now we've got QB with 1 player, 2 from the same team, 1 from the opposing team. Let's add in that rule and let's give this another run. You've got to learn. Look, Scott has been tearing up DFS the last few weeks, and he's telling you, I've been doing this since this shit came out. This is a tool that no one has at their disposal. Now, what I'm just doing, and again, I didn't practice this before. I'm just showing you what you can do. So I'm like, all right, well, if 2 and just a double stack, that only produced 181. What if I do a double stack, same team, and then a comeback? So we're going to get a little more game stacking with it. Let's see what that produces, right? Then try it with 5 uniques, 4 uniques, change around some of the settings. I didn't even get to the forced ownership. Now, I'm going to show you next. You know what? Let me abort this. Let's see what this one produced at 126 lineups compared to the last one. And then I'm going to show you something else. Like, there are so many settings here that you can mess with. All right, this got you to 191. Again, our numbers are going up. Of course, I've made some adjustments to the player pool a little bit, but nonetheless, the numbers are going up. So you got to keep running it with the same settings. This takes hours. All right, now what about if I use our newest ownership projection cap tool, right? And I say, all right, let me eliminate all lineups that are projected over 125% ownership, because those don't win tournaments, right? Those never win. So we go down to, let's say, 125%. Again, what if I do a force at least 2 players, 3 players under 10% ownership in there? Let's do that. Let's get a little more tournament-y with this, right? Give it another run. Let's roll. I want you to do that and then write down the results you're getting. Go back and do it for 10 different slates. Write down the results. Start to figure out, all right, when I'm running this, maybe I don't, what do I need to actually do? How much control over exposures do I need? How much could I have just allowed the tool to do its work for my 150? How many uniques really work the best for me? So it's really, really important to use this tool, guys. I wanted to spend a lot of time explaining this because this is what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot more of it. I wish I had more time, quite honestly, in season. Yeah. By the way, yes, it definitely works for showdowns as well. You should absolutely do this after every showdown. Go back and see what you could have done to hit the nuts, what approach you could have used. Critically important. Showdowns, MMA, every sport, guys. Please do this. Do I usually enter 150 in GPPs? I usually do about 50-20 lineups. How would you build if you're not maximizing? I hand build it. Sujit, this is a great question. When I handcraft a lineup, I do a couple. I can't always mass multi-enter, and I'm going to tell you why. Personally, I'm not able to do it. I can't do it every single slate, and part of it is doing DFS Army. I answer a million questions, and I have to be paying attention to Slack and answering a billion different questions, and it takes me a lot of concentration to actually set up my mass multi-entry to do 150. So I simply just can't handle it every single slate. Like, I didn't do it this week. I kind of wish I had, but I didn't do it this week because I often need to make personal. This is just personal shit. I got to make a decision. There you go. 193. So we're getting up there, but none of this looks like a tournament winner, by the way. So I'd still want to keep adjusting. Where am I going wrong? What else can I do? But this is the fun thing to play with. I'm not going to get into that too much. I want to address your question, Sajid. So I can't always do it. But if I don't do that, again, my focus, and I tell you guys this all the time, I'll throw every lineup I ever make, by the way, into pretty much the Millie Maker or some other similar type of contest. I always throw every lineup in there. But I know a lot of them are throwaways because they're a little too chalky. But my goal, my personal goal on a main slate, I find it extremely... my level of contrarianism has not been to the point where I'm generally going to be expected to take down a big tournament. I've taken them down, but I tend to do much better on 3-game slates, 4 games, where I can kind of go all in on a spot or two. My preference on a main slate is to handcraft a cash lineup and then build off of that some 3-max style lineups, which I'm focused on trying to win the 200 person, the 400 entry, the 50 entry type contest. So, and I could even see getting smaller with it. I see, my style would probably be even more successful if I was just doing like the 15 person, very expensive, very high dollar entry type contest. We want to be able to win. That contest doesn't look sexy when it's $20 and you win, $75 or $100 if you take first. That doesn't look sexy. But when it's $2,000 and you win $20,000, or you win 10 grand, it looks great and it's much, much more winnable. But anyway, back to this. So, but I always try to mass multi-enter like the shorter slates, the 2-game slates, that kind of thing. The 3-gamer that we have coming up this next week, which looks exciting. The Friday night, Saturday, 3-gamer looks interesting. I like those kind of the playoffs. I had a lot of success in playoff mass multi-entry in NFL. And but my big win this season was a handcrafted lineup in a 400 person con. That was my biggest win of the season, and that tends to be where I do my best. I'm also not able to mass multi-enter mini max contests or cheap ones anymore. So pretty much every time I do it, it's a $1,500 to $3,000 investment. I don't like milli makers. I don't like very, very top heavy tournaments. It sucks the money out of my account. So I tend not to do that much of that. And single entry, I've showed you the path, man. You just, like I said, this was my single entry this week, and I showed you the path here. I took the cash and kind of found a little different twist on it. I went up to DeAndre Hopkins, basically. That was it. So I basically took my cash lineup and I said, all right, this is a Kelsey version, but I really loved there was just some players I really liked. So I said, all right, what if Komet gets his 12, 15 points and whatnot? Jason, I'm going to do the breakdown for tonight's game very shortly, but I am going to say it's fucking gross. And I'm actually looking for examples of massive favorites going up against a team that can't score. And I'm trying to see and decipher how those games play out a little bit, because this is going to be like a shitstorm tonight. The Bengals are just not equipped to go up against the Steelers here. So we're going to see what happens there. Yeah, dude, don't use 100% Connor. Connor might not even play. Connor sucks also. But, remember, if you slap a hate on a player unless you did it in captain, if you do it in the flex, it's not going to affect his captain exposure. That needs to be done across the board. Yeah, Steelers D will be popular tonight. Rightfully so. I mean, Finley is epically bad, and it could be a Steelers D night. I think the hardest part with the Steelers is they tend to throw even when they're ahead, but this seems like a running game script. We could have Connor out. Connor's not that good. We'll see what happens tonight. But let's wrap it up here, guys. Hopefully this helped. Again, this went longer than I wanted because I spent another 20 minutes after the cash game review talking about why you should be using this tool. Guys, I'm begging you, please use the backtest tool. Go back and figure out settings. What could you have done different? And if you never are able to hit, by the way, and this is very important, if you're using this backtest tool and you set this up the way that you would for a main slate and you're never able to hit a winning, like a tournament winner, then maybe don't play in tournaments. Don't do the MME. If you can't do it on a backtest mode with the benefit of hindsight, if you can't kind of twerk those settings, twerk them, not tweak them, twerk them. That's my twerk. If you can't tweak them to produce a winning lineup, then you should not be entering these big tournaments and mass multi-entering. Just don't play those. All right. Or get to the point where you can figure out how to tweak it so that you would have won the tournament. All right. We're going to wrap it up there, guys. That's your DFS Army NFL Week 15 weekend review show. These are very important. I hope this helps. I'll be back a little later. We're going to break down tonight's showdown. And then, of course, we got a big week. 3 games, Friday, Saturday, no Thursday game. Week 16, last week of the season of serious DFS. So let's get on point. Let's fucking crush. Good luck, everyone.